was on the mainstream media, so I thought it would be interesting to set the record straight, particularly about Scotland's current situation, before moving on to the topic of Freeports. So first of all, let's talk about hydrogen. Much is made of the idea of using hydrogen as a fuel. But what's not known is the fact that there are two proposals actually for so-called hydrogen hubs, one in the northeast of Scotland and another one which has just received planning consent for Argyll and Bute. Now, hydrogen hubs are, just so that you know, are basically factories that produce hydrogen using surplus wind energy. The wind energy which is usually switched off when there's already too much energy in the energy grid. Now, this is a system which uses a process called electrolysis, which allows the company to use this renewable energy, which is virtually free, to electrolyze water, basically splitting the water into its two component gases, both hydrogen and oxygen, and then pumping these two gases away, compressing them and using them as a fuel. Now, hydrogen makes an excellent heating fuel in the same way that methane does, the stuff that we currently use. So that is one possibility. But the real benefit of Scotland producing hydrogen in this way is that it makes an excellent fuel for heavy industry and also for heavy transportation, such as trains and trucks, and even buses. This can be done either by burning the hydrogen in an engine, which is currently not the ideal way of doing it, it's not the most efficient way of doing it, or using it as a fuel using a thing called a hydrogen fuel cell, which basically allows that hydrogen to be converted back into its component water molecules, and at the same time releasing energy in the form of electricity, which can be then used to propel an electric vehicle, for example. So Scotland is leading the way, as usual, in the building out of such new infrastructure projects, and these will help us to decarbonise still further, but also allowing mainstream transportation to convert from things like heavy diesel, which produces an awful lot of carbon dioxide, but also a lot of fine molecules of carbon soot, which are very bad for our health. Now, the other thing that caught my attention today was a story in the press concerning a Shettleston Primary School, which, despite being in one of the most deprived areas of Glasgow, has now scored the most excellent scores possible for reading and comprehension and writing in any primary school in Scotland. And this is a remarkable achievement for the teaching staff who've turned around a school which was struggling, and with, I think it's fair to say, a school population which comes from a poor area, which would naturally be struggling anyway to try to keep up with some of the, shall we say, more middle-class area schools. But this one has produced an excellent result, something which is unrivaled as far as I can see in most other primary schools. And this goes to show you what's possible when the staff of the school get behind the idea and are committed to teaching those children to the highest possible standards. So this is a congratulations message from me to the teachers in this primary school in Shettleston for doing a fantastic job, something which I think teachers often do not get congratulated on. In fact, teaching is one of the probably the most undervalued Cinderella careers that there are, but it's essential for educating children for their role in the future of Scotland. And speaking of the future of Scotland brings me around to the third item on today's programme, which is Freeports, of which you've probably heard a great deal from the United Kingdom mainstream media about how Freeports will revolutionise both Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom by producing thousands more jobs, by allowing companies to come in and trade without having to pay the usual taxes and duties, which are normally incumbent on any company which is importing and exporting. It sounds terrific, but unfortunately, and I think you will discover this for yourself if you do some reading, that isn't entirely the case. Yes, they can produce jobs, but they don't improve the working conditions of the people who work in these free ports. In fact, quite the reverse. The idea of a free port is to create an economic zone in which normal taxation doesn't exist for those companies who operate there. Essentially, a free port zone, or a free zone, if you like, a low tax zone, is essentially a tax haven. It is, to all intents and purposes, a different country from what surrounds it. And anybody who lives within one of these zones or works in one of these zones is subject not to the normal rules and laws of Scotland and not the taxation of Scotland or even the United Kingdom, but whatever the companies who operate there decide to do. And that includes the way that the local authority is run, for example. It includes the way taxation is done. And remember, people who live outside of these zones, but who work inside of them, will still have to pay their income tax, even if the company that they're working for pays virtually zero corporation tax or any import or export duties. There is an excellent piece online at the moment by Commonweal, which actually explains how the United Kingdom has extracted billions of pounds worth of income from Scotland's industries in the last 20 or so years. But it goes on to say that Freeports, counter to what the United Kingdom narrative is, are not the panacea that we are being led to believe. They are, in fact, basically selling off huge areas of Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom to international or multinational corporations to come and operate here virtually for nothing and make up their own rules as they go along. And not only that, but these freeports give these corporations, the ones who inhabit these zones, almost like ownership of the entire area that they operate in. And that is depriving the rest of Scotland of valuable income. And it also, ironically, is removing vast areas of Scotland from Scotland. So Scotland is actually carved up and sold off in basically parcels of land to foreign corporations. And in the same way, they're trying to do this in England. In fact, in England, it's even worse, because England is going to be eventually not just privatized, but virtually all of England's manufacturing industries, its importing and exporting industries, are going to end up being effectively foreign countries operating inside these islands. Vast areas which are not in these zones will be left out. And these vast areas are the very places where the poverty and deprivation, which I mentioned earlier on in Shettleston, are going to become widespread. Anyone not in one of these zones is going to lose out, because the taxation, which should have come from the areas inside these low taxation freeport areas, is missing. And that puts the burden of taxation onto everybody else. And that means that we are paying for these corporations to come in and rob us of the land, rob us of the taxation revenues that we should have, and effectively our bits of our country have been sold by Westminster to other countries' interests. We've already heard that Japan and I think Italy and their national interests in our wind farms off, for example, off the coast of Aberdeenshire, a massive floating wind farm, is not going to benefit Scotland. It is going to benefit the countries who have invested in that wind farm, like Italy. And so because of that, the outflow of revenue doesn't come to us. And remember, we are being privatised by Westminster to the point where we don't own those resources anymore. They've been sold to multinational corporations. But in Italy, for example, their national interest and Japan's is served by publicly owned corporations. These are owned by those countries which have invested in Scottish wind farms and are now going to be taking the profits from that enterprise to their own economies, not ours. We lose out. So what is the benefit then of freeports? Well, there aren't really any benefits. It just shifts the burden of taxation onto the workforce, who either have to work for these freeport areas or those outside of it who are feeding these freeport areas. All of us will be paying more income tax to compensate for the losses being generated by these freeports. And that means everybody who works for a freeport will pay more income tax, whilst the companies they work for pay virtually nothing. So Scotland itself, if it were independent, at the moment would be able to form its own company, just in the same way that Japan and Italy have done, publicly owned corporations for example, energy, which the SNP promised to do but has never done. But an energy company owned by the people in the same way that the South of Scotland Electricity Board and the Hydro Board used to be, controlled by government, set the price of energy at an affordable level. And if Scotland had the ability to do that, which it would have with independence, Freeports would be a thing of the past. And everything that we earned from our renewable energy, which is ours after all, our oil, our gas, and also our tidal energy, would flow into the Scottish economy and not into some other country's economy, as they currently do. And this is the problem. Basically, Westminster is selling everything off to foreign investors so that they don't have to deal with it anymore. At the same time, Britain is going to be broken up into little foreign enclaves owned by other people's countries, instead of which Scotland is going to be sold off. Two of its biggest low tax areas, these so-called special economic zones, would be covering vast areas of the central belt of Scotland and the northeast. And these are the areas that generate the most income for Scotland. And so obviously these are targets for Freeports. Unfortunately, if Scotland becomes independent, which I expect it will do, it cannot re-enter the European Union or trade in and out of it whilst those special economic zones or Freeports exist, because they are illegal in the European Union. The Freeports which do exist in the European Union have to be publicly owned and benefit the countries who set them up. And that is what Scotland needs at the moment. So, to round things up, we have a hydro hub, a second one, being given the green light for planning consent in Argyll and Bute. We have improving standards of primary education in some of our poorest areas. And we have a choice to make. Do we just sit idly by and allow Westminster to sell off our best industrial assets to the highest international bidder, or do we do something about it? Well, obviously the answer is we need to do something about it. But unfortunately, our current SNP government and even ALBA don't seem to have this planned out. First of all, they don't have a mechanism or a process for freeing us from this stricture of Freeports and United Kingdom control. And even after that, if they had such a thing, they don't have a plan for renationalising our energy and other public infrastructure, which we ought to have as a sovereign state. So, to conclude, well, there are opportunities here for everybody in Scotland to take if we knew how to do it. At the moment, our political leadership appears, both in terms of both the SNP, ALPA, possibly also the Greens as well, I should imagine, are all at the moment deferring to Westminster sovereignty and too frightened or unable or coerced into not taking any kind of action which might actually lead to us leaving the United Kingdom. So something needs to give, otherwise we will lose our most precious assets, and those are our natural resources, our water, our oil, our gas, our renewable electricity from all sources, and whatever other national resources we have at our disposal, including, I guess, whiskey and food, electronics, medical equipment, and other technical expertise which only Scotland has, which I should also have included, incidentally, in the sphere of computer games and social media. Scotland has enormous amounts of talent, and it's going to go to waste if we allow the sell-off of our most profitable national resources by allowing Freeports to continue. So that's it from Inde-Car today. There is hope here, though. Scotland's hydro economy is beginning now to see the first green shoots of growth, with 2 hydro hubs planned, with all these renewable resources around us, but no way to benefit from them whilst we are weighed down by the yoke of United Kingdom Union membership, if you like. We need to get free of that, and we need to take back control of these resources to guarantee the future prosperity of everybody who lives in Scotland. And remember, everybody who does live in Scotland is by definition a Scot, and because of that, we all have individual sovereignty, and if we act collectively, we can exercise that in our own right to self-determination, and that needs to be done urgently. That's it from me today. As usual, keep the faith, and remember, please, if you can afford it, to keep helping me by making small donations to my Inde-Car crowdfund through PayPal. And I'll continue to make these programs as often as I'm able to. And I don't need to point out the deficiencies of the United Kingdom media that operates in Scotland. It's all aimed at convincing us to give up. But as I said last time, winners never quit and quitters never win, and that is us to a T. We need to not quit. We need to keep going regardless of how long this takes. Our political leadership at the moment is lacking any kind of backbone to do something about this. That can change, but that will only change if we, as a collective country of people, decide otherwise. Remember, we can remove our own government. We have the sovereign right to do it. We can remove the SNP government. We could remove the Westminster government. We just simply need to exercise that sovereignty. Anyway, I will see you all soon. Keep the faith, and remember, Inde-Car will be back on your screens very shortly. I hope you've enjoyed today's live stream. It will be going out on other platforms later. Incidentally, just so that you know, my previous recorded editions, which used Google, by the way, as the means of recording, Google has warned me that I cannot use these for mass communication, and they are likely to restrict the number of people who can share those videos. But this, on YouTube, is a free-for-all, so everyone can share this video as much as they like, and it doesn't matter. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Bye for now. Have a great day. Hey.